At the southern edge of South America, there is a place where the map starts to feel unreliable. The wind does not pass through. It owns the land. It bends trees sideways until they grow that way permanently. It flattens grass against the ground for years at a time. It erases sound. And in the middle of it, a single dirt track leads toward a cabin that should not be there. No town behind it. No town ahead of it. Just one roof, one rider, one silence that doesn't end. This is not the edge of a country. It's the edge of something older than that. And the closer you get, the less the world behaves the way you think it should. From a distance, Patagonia is usually described with one word: empty. But that word is wrong, because what looks like emptiness here is actually pressure. Wind pressure, ice pressure, geological pressure. Pressure from a land that has been shaped by forces most places never experience at this intensity. Patagonia stretches across the southern tip of Argentina and Chile, covering more than 400,000 square miles, roughly the size of Egypt, and yet fewer than 2 million people live in it. That ratio alone tells you something. This is not a place humans filled. It is a place humans reached and stopped. Because beyond a certain latitude, the planet stops behaving like a continent. The land narrows, the oceans close in from both sides, and the weather stops belonging to any one country. You feel it immediately. The sky is bigger here, the horizon is farther, the silence is deeper, and the moment you try to describe it, the words feel too small. To understand Patagonia, you can't start with its beauty. You have to start with its force. Because everything here, the mountains, the glaciers, the grasslands, the animals, the people, exists because it survived something. And the first thing you meet is the wind. Chapter 1. The wind that rules everything. Before you see Patagonia, you hear it. A low, steady pressure against the ears that never fully releases. It is not a storm. It is not a gust. It is a constant. In most of the world, wind comes and goes. It arrives, it peaks, it passes. Here, it behaves differently. It is structural. It belongs to the landscape the same way stone belongs to a mountain. There is a geographic reason for this. At this latitude, between roughly 40 and 55 degrees south, there is almost no land to slow the air down. The Southern Ocean wraps around the entire planet uninterrupted. Wind builds up over thousands of miles of open water, accelerates, and then hits the Andes like a wall. Sailors named this zone the Roaring Forties. Further south, the Furious 50s. Further still, the Screaming 60s. Those names are not poetic, they are warnings. Average wind speeds across the Patagonian steppe regularly exceed 40 miles per hour. Gusts above 100 are not rare, and they can last for days. You can see the result before you feel it. Trees on the steppe do not grow upward, they grow sideways. Entire trunks bent at 45 degrees, locked in that position permanently, branches streaming in one direction like frozen hair. Flags here don't wave, they vibrate. Doors don't close softly, they slam. Conversations outside are short because the wind takes your voice before it reaches the listener. And once you understand this, the rest of Patagonia starts to make sense. The low houses, the stone walls, the narrow windows, the gates weighted with chains, the trees planted in tight rows as wind breaks. Everything built here is built against the wind. But the wind is not only an inconvenience, it is an architect. It carves rock, it erodes valleys, it shapes dunes inland from coasts that no longer exist. It sculpts the surface of glaciers. It even shapes how clouds form over the mountains, stretching them into long, flat lenses that hover above the peaks without moving. In Patagonia, the wind is not weather. It is a permanent collaborator. And once you accept that, you stop fighting it. You start reading it. You check the direction before you open a door. You position yourself behind rocks without thinking. You learn which slope is sheltered and which is not. You move the way the animals move here. Low, deliberate, angled. Because in Patagonia, the wind is the first thing that teaches you how to exist in it. And the second thing is the land it reveals. Chapter 2. The Steppe. Leave the mountains behind and Patagonia opens. Not gradually, all at once. The steppe stretches from the eastern foothills of the Andes all the way to the Atlantic, a distance of several hundred miles. Dry grass, low shrubs, gravel. Almost nothing taller than a man's knee, and above it, a sky so wide it changes how you measure distance. In this landscape, a mountain 30 miles away looks like it could be 10 minutes away, and a sheep station 2 hours away looks like a dot you could walk to before lunch. The scale here lies to you, because your eyes have nothing to anchor to. No trees, no buildings, no landmarks, just horizon after horizon folding into itself. And yet the steppe is not empty. It is one of the most precisely organized ecosystems on the continent. Guanacos, the wild cousin of the llama, move across it in small herds, covering huge distances in search of grass. Their fur is thick enough to resist the cold, their legs built for ground that shifts between rock, sand, and frost. They are what this land sustains and what this land selects for. Above them, Andean condors ride the thermals. With a wingspan of more than 10 feet, they are among the largest flying birds on Earth. On the steppe, they barely need to flap. They tilt into the wind and glide for hours, scanning the ground for anything that has stopped moving. And on the ground, almost invisible, the Patagonian puma hunts. Smaller than its North American cousin. Faster, far more elusive. Most visitors will never see one, but the guanacos know. Every few minutes, one of them lifts its head and holds the position, watching a direction you can't read. This is the rhythm of the steppe, watching, waiting, moving only when necessary, because energy here is not wasted. The same logic shapes human life on the steppe. The estancias, the old sheep stations, are often separated by dozens of miles of open land. One family, one homestead, one generator, a windbreak of poplars planted decades ago, a few corrals, a track that leads to the nearest neighbor after half a day of driving. The gauchos who still work these stations don't move the way riders move in films. They move economically. Long, slow patrols, a knife at the belt, a kettle on the fire. Silence that isn't awkward, because silence is the default here. When you sit with them, you notice something. They don't fill the space with words. They fill it with attention. Weather, animals, tracks, distance, time. Everything is being read at once, quietly, in the background. Because on the steppe, small mistakes become large problems fast. And this is the part outsiders often miss. Patagonia is not an adventure playground. It is a working landscape. People live here year-round with the wind and the cold and the distance, not because it is beautiful, but because this is their land, their family's land, and often their grandparents' land before that. The beauty is real, but it is not the point. The point is endurance. And the steppe teaches that lesson before any of the famous peaks come into view. Chapter 3. The peaks that do not behave like mountains, and then the horizon breaks. After hundreds of miles of flat land, the Andes rise without warning. not as a slow incline, but as a vertical interruption. One moment, the steppe. The next, granite. Patagonia holds some of the most distinctive mountain silhouettes on Earth, and the reason is not their height. The Himalayas are higher, the Alps are older, the Rockies are longer. What makes the Patagonian peaks different is their shape. They are almost vertical. Mount Fitz Roy on the Argentine side rises to about 11,170 feet. That is not extreme by global standards, but its walls climb nearly 6,000 feet of exposed granite in a single sweep. Sheer, clean, almost without slope. Next to it, Cerro Torre rises like a knife, capped with a crown of ice that forms, collapses, and reforms depending on the weather. And across the border, in Chilean Patagonia, the Torres del Paine rise in a trio of granite towers over a landscape of lakes, grassland, and forest that looks at first glance like someone assembled it from 5 different countries. The reason those mountains look the way they do is written in their history. Around 12 million years ago, molten rock pushed upward into older sedimentary layers and cooled underground into massive blocks of granite. They never erupted. They hardened in place. Then the softer rock around them was removed, not by one event, by glaciers. During successive ice ages, enormous sheets of ice flowed outward from the Andes, carving the landscape with a precision no river could match. Glaciers don't just erode, they excavate. They pluck entire blocks of stone from the ground and carry them away, leaving behind near vertical walls. What you see today in Fitz Roy, Cerro Torre, and the white Torres del Paine is the granite core that was too dense to be removed. The mountains are not what was built. They are what survived. And that explains why they look almost architectural, why their walls seem cut rather than formed, why they stand alone instead of blending into a range. They are the last witnesses of a much larger landscape that ice took away. But these peaks are not stable in the way mountains usually are. The weather around them is some of the most violent on the planet. Fitz Roy is famous among climbers, not for its height, but for its window, the rare days when the summit is actually accessible. Most of the year, the peak is hidden inside a cloud that wraps around it and does not let go. Climbers sometimes wait weeks for a single day of calm. When that day arrives, it is short. The wind returns, the clouds return, the mountain disappears, and that unpredictability is part of what makes this region so strange to photograph, to describe, to even stand inside of. The landscape does not hold still. 1 hour, you see Fitz Roy in full sunlight. The next, you see nothing but gray. An hour after that, the clouds tear open and a single shaft of light hits one wall while the rest of the range stays hidden. Patagonia rarely reveals itself all at once. It rewards patience, and it punishes assumption. Chapter 4. Ice that moves just beyond these mountains. The landscape changes again. The ground becomes ice. Not frozen lakes, not snowfields. Ice, compressed over thousands of years into a body thick enough to bend geography. The southern Patagonian ice field is the 3rd largest reserve of fresh water on Earth, after Antarctica and Greenland. It stretches roughly 220 miles from north to south and holds dozens of glaciers flowing outward toward the mountains and valleys below. Most of it has almost never been walked on. Its interior is still one of the least explored places in the southern hemisphere, but the edges of it reach the world. And the most famous of those edges is the Perito Moreno Glacier. Perito Moreno is not the biggest glacier in Patagonia, but it behaves in a way that almost no other major glacier on the planet does. It is, for now, stable. While glaciers across most of the world are retreating quickly, Perito Moreno advances and retreats in rough balance. It pushes forward into Lake Argentino at a pace measured in feet per day, its front wall towering about 240 feet above the water, roughly the height of a 20-story building, and reaching far deeper below the surface. And because it advances, it breaks. Standing on the viewing platforms across the lake, you hear something you can't prepare for. First, a low cracking sound. Deep, distant, almost structural. A pause. Then a sound closer to thunder than ice. And then a section of the front wall, sometimes small, sometimes the size of a building, separates from the glacier and falls into the lake. The impact sends a shockwave across the water. Then the silence returns, and you understand, without being told, that the glacier is alive in a way that the word frozen cannot describe. It is moving. It is grinding. It is reshaping the valley beneath it in real time. What makes Perito Moreno remarkable is not only the spectacle, it is also what happens every few years. As the glacier pushes forward, it eventually reaches a peninsula of land on the opposite shore and blocks one arm of the lake from the other. Water builds up on one side, sometimes rising dozens of feet higher than the other. Pressure accumulates. And then, without warning, the ice dam gives way. Water carves a tunnel through the front of the glacier. The tunnel widens. An arch forms. And eventually, the arch collapses, sometimes with a crack heard miles away, releasing the pressure in one of the rarest natural spectacles on the continent. Locally, they call it La Ruptura, the rupture. It does not happen on schedule. Years can pass between events. But when it does happen, people travel from across the country just to witness it. Because it is a direct reminder that in Patagonia, nothing is decorative. Even the ice has a purpose, a cycle, and a force. And beyond Perito Moreno, across the rest of the ice field, other glaciers are less patient. The Uppsala Glacier, once one of the largest in South America, has retreated several miles in recent decades. The Viedma Glacier is thinning. The Gray Glacier on the Chilean side has lost visible mass within the span of a single human lifetime. What you see here is not static. It is a working model of climate change at the scale of a continent, visible to the naked eye, measurable year after year. Patagonia does not hide what is happening. It shows it directly. And that is part of why the region has become one of the most closely watched natural laboratories in the southern hemisphere. The ice is beautiful, but it is also information. Chapter 5: The Forgotten Coast. Most people who picture Patagonia picture the mountains and the glaciers. Almost no one pictures the coast. And yet, on the Atlantic side, Patagonia has a coastline so rich in wildlife that scientists describe parts of it as one of the most biologically important marine corridors in the southern hemisphere. The center of that world is the Valdez Peninsula. From above, it looks like a hammer of land jutting into the ocean. Two large bays cut into its sides, sheltered from the open sea. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it is unlike almost any other place on the continent, because the animals that come here do not come for scenery. They come because the geography works. Each year, between June and December, southern right whales migrate to these bays to calve and to mate. They come from the open Atlantic to reach some of the calmest, most protected waters within thousands of miles. Mothers stay close to shore with their newborn calves. Males circle in deeper water, and because the bays are shallow and wind-sheltered, you can see them from the beach. Not from a boat far offshore, from the beach. blackbacks rising through the surface less than 100 yards away. A tail lifting out of the water with impossible slowness and then folding back down. A calf pressed against its mother's side, learning how to breathe at the rhythm its body will keep for the rest of its life. This is one of the few places on Earth where a whale of that size can still be seen this easily, from land without specialized equipment. But the whales are only one layer. Further along the coast, the peninsula hosts huge colonies of elephant seals and sea lions. The males, some weighing over 8,000 pounds, haul themselves onto the beach during breeding season, lie in uneven lines across the sand, and defend territory through pure mass. And offshore, around Punta Norte, something even rarer happens. Orcas have developed a hunting technique here that has not been documented anywhere else in the world in quite the same form. They intentionally beach themselves. During high tide, they swim close to shore, track young sea lions along the gravel edge, and then, at the exact moment, surge out of the water, grab their prey, and slide back into the sea before the wave recedes. It is a learned behavior. Adults teach it to juveniles over years, and it is one of the clearest examples in the animal world of a skill passed down as culture, not instinct. Scientists have been studying this specific population for decades. Researchers sit on the cliffs above the beach for hours, cameras trained, waiting for events that may happen only a few times a season. And above the waterline, the bird life is its own category. Further south at Punta Tombo, more than 500,000 Magellanic penguins arrive every year to nest. They come from the ocean in staggered waves, cross the beach, climb the dry ground behind it, and occupy burrows dug into the soil, some reused year after year by the same pairs. Walking a narrow path through one of these colonies is one of the strangest experiences in Patagonia. Penguins on every side, standing, preening, sleeping, arguing, looking at you without much interest. There is no glass, no barrier, just a line of earth, and the understanding that you are the visitor. And across the Andes, on the Pacific side, the coastline changes character entirely. It splinters into fjords, islands, and channels carved by the same glaciers that shaped the peaks inland. This is one of the most fragmented coastlines on Earth. Thousands of islands, most of them uninhabited, shaped by rain, wind, and ice. For centuries, indigenous peoples navigated this maze in small boats, reading currents and tides the way other cultures read roads. Today, much of it sits silent. But the geography remains, and it is a reminder that Patagonia has two coasts. One open, windswept, and biologically overflowing, and one drowned, forested, and almost impenetrable. Two edges of the same place. Neither of them the one outsiders imagine. Chapter 6. The people the wind chose in every part of Patagonia. There are traces of people who came here long before the roads did. Not many, never many, but enough to shape what the region became. In the Cueva de las Manos, the Cave of Hands, in the canyon of the Pinturas River, the walls are covered in hundreds of handprints, made between roughly 9,500 and 13,000 years ago. The method was simple. The hand was placed against the stone, and pigment was blown over it through a hollow bone, leaving a negative silhouette. Most of the hands are left hands, most are small. Many belong to children. What is striking is not only their age, it is their calm. They were made over many generations by different groups across thousands of years. This was not a single event. It was a long, repeated presence in one specific place. People came back to this wall again and again for reasons we will probably never fully recover. and the stone remembers them more clearly than any written document could. Further south, other groups lived in ways that are almost incomprehensible today. Near the southern coasts and channels of Tierra del Fuego, the Selknam, Yamana, and Kaweskar peoples developed cultures adapted to conditions that would kill an unprepared outsider within days. The Yamana, in particular, lived along the Beagle Channel in small canoes, fished in near-freezing water, and maintained body temperature partly through continuous fires. Fires they carried with them even at sea, on beds of clay inside their boats. The early European sailors who reached this region in the 1500s saw those fires burning at night along the coast. They named the land after them. Tierra del Fuego, Land of Fire. The name stuck. But the peoples who gave rise to it did not survive contact, not because they couldn't adapt, but because they had no defense against imported diseases and the pressures of colonization. By the early 20th century, their traditional way of life had nearly ended. A small number of descendants remain today, and efforts to preserve their languages and memory are ongoing. But the silence along those channels now is not the silence of an empty land. It is the silence of a land that was emptied. Further north, in the 19th and 20th centuries, a different population arrived. Welsh settlers looking for a place to preserve their language and culture away from pressures at home established colonies in the Chubut Valley in the 1860s. Their descendants still live there today. In towns like Gaiman and Trelew, you can sit in a Welsh tea house, hear Welsh spoken alongside Spanish, and see chapels built in a style that looks transplanted directly from the British coast. Germans, Italians, Croatians, and others came in later waves, often drawn by sheep farming, trade, or the chance to start again at the edge of the known world. And the gaucho, the horsemen of the southern plains, formed their own distinct culture across both sides of the Andes, shaped by the steppe, the cattle, the wind, and a long tradition of independence from central authority. What all of these people share is not ethnicity, religion, or language. It is a relationship with the land that is not romantic. It is practical. They talk about weather before they talk about anything else. They plan around the seasons, not the calendar. They measure distance in hours of driving, not miles. They know which animals do well in which valleys and which don't. They know which winds bring rain and which strip the moisture out of the soil. They are not conquerors of the landscape. They are tenants of it. And in Patagonia, that distinction matters, because this is not a place you subdue. It is a place you learn. Chapter 7. What Patagonia actually is. If you stand in Patagonia long enough, the place begins to correct you. You arrive expecting scenery. You leave with something harder to name. Because Patagonia is not a landscape in the conventional sense. It is not a view. It is not a backdrop. It is not a destination the way other famous places are destinations. It is a system of wind, ice, stone, water, and life, held together by forces that do not pause for the people inside them. The wind doesn't stop for your hike. The glacier doesn't pause for your photograph. The whales don't arrive because anyone is waiting for them. Everything here runs on its own clock. And the closer you look, the more that clock asks questions of you instead of the other way around. How much silence can you sit inside before it stops feeling empty? How long can you stand in front of something that will still be there in 1,000 years, knowing you will not? How do you describe distance in a place where distance itself has a different meaning? These are not rhetorical questions. They are the actual experience of being here. And they are also why Patagonia keeps getting misunderstood from the outside. It is often described as the end of the world. But that phrase tends to flatten it into a marketing line. A trophy on a travel list, a place to tick off before moving on. The reality is more interesting. Patagonia is not the end of the world. It is the place where the world stops performing, where the atmosphere, the geology, and the wildlife stop arranging themselves for an audience and simply continue doing what they have been doing for millions of years. That is what the wind teaches. That is what the steppe teaches. That is what the peaks teach when they refuse to come out from behind their clouds for days. That is what the glacier teaches when a piece of it falls into a lake with no audience and makes the same sound it has been making since long before there was anyone to hear it. Patagonia does not need you to be here. And somehow, that is the thing that makes it unforgettable. Because most places in the modern world are built around attention. Patagonia is not. It is built around endurance. At the southern edge of the continent, the land narrows until there is almost nothing left of it. The ocean closes in from the east. The ocean closes in from the west. The Andes run out into the sea in a scatter of islands and channels that the maps struggle to name. And above it all, the wind keeps moving. The same wind that bent the trees sideways on the steppe. The same wind that tore the clouds away from Fitz Roy for a single hour and then buried it again. The same wind that has been circling this latitude for longer than any country on any map. Patagonia is often imagined as the place where things end. But standing inside it, that is not what it feels like. It feels like the place where things finally stop pretending. The wind is honest, the ice is honest, the silence is honest, the distance is honest, and the people who live here quietly, generation after generation, know something the rest of the world keeps forgetting. That land is not a backdrop for our lives. It is the thing we are inside of. And on this particular land, at this particular latitude, that truth is impossible to ignore. You do not visit Patagonia. You enter a place where the planet is still in charge. And when you leave, if you leave, a small part of the silence comes with you. Not as a memory, as a correction. Because once you have stood inside a wind that does not stop, once you have watched a wall of ancient ice fall into a lake, once you have heard a whale breathe at the edge of a beach no road quite reaches, the idea of an ordinary horizon never quite returns. This is Patagonia, not the end of the world. The edge where the world reminds you what it actually is.
Yeah!